Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is you're watching this. How was your week? Do anything fun? Did you do anything for yourself? Well, we were traveling. We were on vacation. We're back. Our vacation, as to use the words of my father, our vacation turned into emergency crisis, but everything's fine. They're as fine as it can be, settled as much as it can be for now. But it also leads me into what we're going to talk about today. But first, happy Star Wars Day. It's May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. It is also Star Wars month, as us Star Wars fans call. This is the May. So yes, we're huge Star Wars fans here, especially if you guys know my husband. Huge Star Wars fans. I always say we like all the movies, all the one-offs, the shows, everything. So I will say, when I did meet my husband, when I met Sean, he wasn't too fond of the trilogy, the prequels that came out, 1, 2, and 3. Until I was like, yeah, but look at the costuming in it. Like, that costuming is just amazing. And so after that, he became more a fan of the prequels when it's like, no, sometimes if you don't like the movie, look at the technical side of it because, anyways. But so yes, Amidala's costumes and the prequels, wow. So yes. Anyways, and plus after working in technical theater and completely understanding what the process of everything, I mean, yes, movies are just a little bit different in a sense, but like it's still very similar. Yes. So, but anyways, so back into what we're talking about. So, I will say nobody likes to talk about this stuff. I get it. I understand it. Why, but interesting enough, you somewhat deal with this in your job in a couple of different ways. With me, as usual, we'll, talk about it and then discuss how it helps prevent burnout and work through burnout. So since that's just kind of our main theme for this channel is preventing and working through burnout, for you. So again, how does being prepared for these things help prevent through burnout? But again, nobody wants to think about life without a loved one or something bad happening to them, even sometimes to ourselves. But let's think about it this way. In an emergency, you will be able to help out easier, or you will be able to have things taken care of the way you want. So this is going to end up being 2 parts. Today, we're going to talk about in case of an emergency and something happens to you and you have to go to the hospital. How many times in your job have you had, I know we've had it a couple of times, and I worked in emergency veterinary clinic, where there was a wreck. The dog comes in because they were in the car. The parent had to go to the hospital. The pet parent had to go to the hospital. So it's sometimes those situations are challenging by what you do for the animal without the owner there. Can't get a hold of the owner because the owner's, being taken care of for whatever is going on with them. And so the question is, are you prepared if you're that owner, right? So let's start with if you were to go to, if something happens and you would go to the hospital, are your bills auto drafted? I will say that is the easiest thing to do. To me, it is. Make sure if you set up an auto draft that it's taken out of your account directly and not through your check card, if possible. I know some places don't do, like, you have to do your check card or a credit card. But if you can do it through your bank account, a lot of times that's more secure. But also, too, there are banks out there that if they feel like that your card's been compromised, they will cut off your card, they'll cancel it, and send you another one without telling you. And then you have to go back to that company or all those places that you have auto drafted out of your check card and fix it. Now, what would you do if it was supposed to be auto drafted between the times of when the bank cut off your card and before you get your new card, right? Your bill's late. So again, I'm just throwing that out there. Keep that in mind. Do you have direct deposit? So make sure, your money's going in to your account. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about cashing a check, or, depositing a check, period. Cashing or depositing a check. Also, too, who is signed onto your checking account? Is your spouse signed onto your checking account? Is there someone signed onto your checking account that you trust that can take care of these things? Now, keep in mind, if they're signed onto your checking account, if they don't have a check card, that's fine. If they need to get one, they can go to the bank and get a temporary one to use if they need to have access to your account and are not able to. Or if something happened to your check card because of whatever reason, the emergency you're in, your check card got destroyed or something for whatever reason, they can go to the bank and get a temporary check card if they're signed onto your account. If you're in the hospital and you need that, and you're the only one signed onto your account, only you can go to the bank and get that. Granted, you can call and have one sent to you, but if you need it immediately, you can't. You would have to physically go to the bank and get a temporary one yourself. Nobody else can do that unless they're signed onto your account. Also, make sure if someone is signed onto your account or you're signing someone onto your account. 2 little words make a huge difference, and an or. So if your account, if it's Jack and Jill signed onto your account, then both Jack and Jill has to sign off on anything that's done. They have to be, it has to be both of you. Now, if it's Jack or Jill, Jack or Jill can do anything they want without the other. So keep that in mind, okay? If you're the only one signed onto the account, I get it in a sense. Somebody, having someone having access to your money, somebody you trust and everything, that's hard, that's challenging. Think about it. Or 2, you can always do, you can sign someone on, but don't give them a check card. Granted, they'll be able to go get one if they wanted to. I know there's so many different ways around that. But another option is you can go in or have somebody have access to your account in a sense. If you want to do that, that's another option. So they can have access to, if you want them to have access to your online banking, or if you just want them to have access to your check card, or something you can, they can, in other words, they can just grab your check card and go take out money or whatever for you if needed. So yes, but another option, one day go in and sit down and talk to a bank officer and, let them know your concerns, find out what options you have. With that, there may be more options out there. These are just ones that I know of and I'm aware of just from experience. And of course, from my mom being a banker, granted, that was like my mom passed 10 years ago. So, a lot has changed between now and then. And two, each bank is different. Each bank has different rules, regulations. Is it a national bank, or is it a bank, or is it a credit union? Like, even credit unions are completely different, and then credit unions within each state is different. So there's a lot of different regulations and rules each bank has. So sometimes the best option is just to go in and sit down and talk to one of the officers in the bank. Bank officers, not police officers that are at the bank, but one of the people in the offices of the bank, and talk to them and find out, like, hey, these are my concerns. Like, I just want to be prepared. What are my options? And there may be better options out there than I'm mentioning that I don't know about that they offer you. So that's something to think about too, as well. Also, what are your plan for your pets? For someone to take care of them, right? If something happens, if you're in an emergency, do you trust your spouse, your partner, or if you have animals together? And I don't mean this in a mean way. I mean this in a sense that sometimes, and let's get real, in some relationships, sometimes the animals are one person's animal. One person takes care of them. The other person wants nothing to do with them. Or sometimes too, even if that's not the case, even if it's both of, if they're both of your animals and both of you love them, you may be the only one that takes care of them and knows, like they're feeding their medications and stuff, because you're in the industry, right? So of course you're going to be the one taking care of them, understandably. I will say it's interesting. Both my husband and I, like, we both take care of our animals in a sense. Like, it's back and forth. We share depending on whose day it is, what day it is. We have, and especially when it comes to their medical care, we're both in on that decision. Like, and it's always interesting too when a couple of times, like, for instance, one of the specialists who or surgeons we usually don't use. We usually used one of the other surgeons where he had worked this one time, and one of our dogs, and she comes in and she was asking me questions. Well, I was the one that was with the way the schedule was working, our schedules were working. I was the one mainly taking care of our girl at that time. And she was like, oh, well, I'll just ask Sean. And I'm like, well, no, like, this is the answer to your question, So she thought because Sean was a veterinarian and her colleague, I wouldn't know the answers to the question because I was just the wife who was bringing the dog in because he was working, or, he was sleeping or something. I can't even remember why Sean wasn't there for this particular interaction. But so I say that in a sense that I was a little offended, but she also didn't know us well enough to know that for the most part, like, I knew a lot of what was going on. And then, so much so, even with our girl towards the end, like, she got to the point, Kaya, our husky, she got very cage aggressive towards the end of her life. And she got very protective over Sean and I. So even like in a room, like, for a technician to come and get her, she didn't do very well. And so we had to literally get her prepared and hand her to them, like the leash or something, to them. So when Kaya was staying overnight for a blood transfusion and chemotherapy, like, I slept in the run with her so that the technicians could come in and do what they needed to do for her during the transfusion and then during her chemo. So yes, my point being, I know I get off on soapboxes and tangents sometimes, but my point being, like, for your animals in case of an emergency? Is your spouse or your partner like that involved in their caretaking? And if not, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Because I mean, some people are just that way, and not in a bad way, but there's nothing wrong with it. Some people just aren't that involved. And sometimes, a lot of times, that depends on their schedule and what they have going on. It doesn't mean they love them any less if they're not as involved. They have a different way of showing their love. And so, because they're limited for what's going on in their life, and that's fine. As long as the animal is getting loved and treated well, I don't care. Okay? So that's all I ask. But my point being, if something was to happen to you or your animals in an emergency situation, you're in the hospital or something, are your animals taken care of? Is it set up? Do you, is your partner or spouse able to do this? So if that's the case, if they're not, that's okay. You need to find someone that you can call that can do that. Someone you trust, someone like even if it's a friend, a colleague at work, if you need to hire a pet, hire a pet sitter, I would recommend one who has their own business. That's just me personally. But also know their background. But have them come in and be familiar. Make sure somebody come in and is familiar with your animals and they're familiar with them, which you should know this already, being in the industry. Have them familiar with your animals. Have them come in, go through like your routine, and then write everything down. Like, how much they eat, any medications they take in, things, and even little quirks they have or whatnot. Like, write all that down and put it somewhere in case somebody needs it. Even if it's your partner or spouse, like who could take care of them if you were in the hospital or something, like even if it's for them as just a reminder, because you got to remember at that point, their main focus is you. Understandably, nothing wrong with that. They're concerned about you. So they may need a little reminder. Oh yeah, I need to do XYZ. So-and-so needs this. We even go through that. We have moments where, oh my God, I forgot. And it's things that we do every day. So we have those moments too. So even when it's not an emergency, like it happens. So there's nothing wrong with that. Make sure you have that to make sure they're taken care of. And two, also, even if your partner thinks that they're able to take care of the animals while you're in the hospital or emergency, one, it could be a break for them, but two, like, make sure you always have somebody in mind, or somebody that could step in, like if it became too much for them, or if something came up at their work that they had to take care of and they couldn't do that for your animals, or something, if something comes up, make sure you have the third person there that can step in at any time, just in case. There's nothing wrong. The old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Like there's nothing wrong with that. But it's always good to have that just in case, right? Have that plan in place just in case. All right. Also too, another thing to think about, in case of emergency, make a list of like who to call or not to call. I mean, this is life. We all have those people, those family members or something that you don't want anything to do with, you don't want called or whatever. My father was caretaking for a really good friend of his. Did not want his family called whatsoever. They only reached out to him when they needed something. So again, make sure you have a list of who you want to call or who not to call. Right? Because if God forbid something happens and you're unconscious in the hospital, you can't tell them not to call, let's say you're not on good terms with your father or your parents or whatever. You haven't spoken to them in years. Guess what? Who are the first people that are called in case of emergency? One, if you have a case of emergency, they'll do that. If they don't know, your parents, your siblings, and then your child. Those are the people they call. If you don't have so you need to make a list of who you want to call or who you don't want to call, or even if there was somebody with you, the first thing they're gonna, say, who do you want to call? They'll call other people. They may end up calling somebody you don't want to call. So make sure you have a list of who you want called and who you don't want to call. And the other thing to think about, medical power of attorneys. Attorneys, not plural, sorry. Medical power of attorney. All right. So again, this, a lot of times when you go into the hospital, for any surgery or whatever, they do that. They do that, have that on file or whatever. But let's talk about if something happens. Medical power of attorney. You need this in a sense. You go in the hospital, the only people that they will speak to and they can speak to by law, parent, sibling, child, or spouse. Yeah. Parent, sibling, child, or spouse. Legally married spouse. Now, common law marriage, some states don't recognize common law marriage. So if you're common law marriage, I would have one just in case. Those are people that can only make decisions on you. Those are people they will only talk to and let them know what's going on with you. All right. So, for example, before Sean and I got married, he had a conference across country. My mom was a notary. We had her type up that if something was to happen in a decision, to either one of us, she did it for both of us, but for either one of us, that if need to be, if they couldn't get a hold of like our parents, that we could make the decision for the other and that we could be informed of what's going on with the other. And we carried it with us. Do this because sometimes they don't have that time to reach, depends on what's going on. They don't have that time to reach your parents or whoever, your next of kin, especially if you're traveling with a friend. And even at these conferences and stuff, like if you're traveling with somebody you trust, like I would highly recommend that. But medical power of attorney it gives you, it gives your caretaker, or the person that you want, the ability to know what's going on with you if they need to make medical decisions for you. I would also make sure they know what you want if you're making someone your medical power of attorney. Now, don't worry, they can't take over like, oh, they can have me committed or anything. No, they can't do that. I mean, for this to be also enacted for them to physically do something, like it has to go through doctors and stuff like that. You have to be proven to be out of sound of mind. Okay, so don't freak out over that. Honestly, the medical power of attorney to me more so is just so that someone who is not your next of kin can know what's going on with you. Okay, if that's what you want. So keep that in mind. So also, I will say if you have all of this set up, like in case of emergency, like it'll be easier on you and everyone, including yourself. So this part, like how does that help with burnout, prevent and work through burnout? Shit happens. Life happens. Like I said, our vacation turned into an emergency crisis. The first full day we were there, that first full morning we were there, we weren't even there 24 hours. And things happen. So if all this is set up, you don't have to worry about like any of that. Like it can be taken care of. So if it's you in the emergency and this happens to you, this is taken care of. You don't have to worry about it. So that doesn't add to the stress or the burnout or anything. That's one less thing that's off your plate. Because how we're talking about stress, it adds to, stress creates the burnout. It adds to your burnout, right? So that's one less thing off your plate. If you're the one that emergency happened to your family member, that adds more steps and more things that you have to do to be able to help them. So you have to go get signed on to the checking account. You have to go do this. You have to go do that. When if it was already in place, you can just do what you need to do. And you don't need that added stress with everything else going on. And you can take care of it how you're able to take care of it, or the best way you can. The best you can, if that makes sense. So that, again, it's just one less thing you have to worry about. It does, even if your plate's already overfilling, because if your plate's overfilling and you have to add this on top of it, there's, because those are things that has to be done. It's not things that you can put off in an emergency situation. So yes. So things to keep in mind. And of course, obviously, we want to make sure these little ones are taken care of the way you want them taken care of and the way you feel comfortable for them to be taken care of. And of course, being in your field, I can't tell you how many times, even Sean, being emergency medicine, the pet sitter has brought the animal in because the parents are overseas on vacation. I can count on my hands and fill up both my hands for how many times this has happened to him. And in how many cases. It's crazy. It's almost Murphy's Law. So again, like I said, definitely make sure you have everything set up, a plan set up if you're vacationing. Same thing. Okay? Because it's not a vacation if you're thinking about your baby in the hospital, right? Or something going on with them. So anyways, all right. So that's it for this week. Next week, we'll talk about estate planning and why that's important, and and how that helps prevent and help you work through burnout. I know, right? So if you need to talk to someone, don't forget you have Lifeboat with NOMV, Not One More Vet. You have, that's the peer-to-peer, 988. If you need to talk to someone immediately, you can call or text 988 or text 741-741. So yes, inspired by one of my favorite poems, but inspired by an old poem. You may not know that the world needs you, but it does. For no one else can smile your smile, say your piece, or shine your light. You are unique, and you alone can fill your place. If you were not here to shine your light, what would happen to the pilgrims passing by your empty place in the darkness without your light to help them on their way? You may not know the world needs you, but it does. Remember, what you do matters, and the world is a better place with you in it. Dear Person's Company. All right, until next week, do something for you. All right, take care of yourself, and we'll see you next week.